My mother warned me to stay away from my new best friend's dad. She called him a monster, a predator, a danger to every kid on the street. But when I finally looked him in the eyes, I knew she was dead wrong, and what I found next changed everything. The courtroom smelled like old carpet and central heating turned up too high. I was 12 years old and I was sitting in a wooden chair that was too big for me, waiting for someone to call my name. My legs didn't reach the floor. I kept looking at the door at the far end of the room, the one Ryan's mom had walked through 20 minutes earlier in a gray blazer, clutching a photo album like it was a Bible, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue she hadn't needed yet. Karen Davidson looked like someone's grieving aunt. She had the posture of a woman who had been wronged and knew it. She sat with her 3 lawyers arranged around her like a phalanx, and she spent every moment before the proceedings started making eye contact with anyone in the room who looked uncertain. The bailiff, the clerk, the court reporter, the way people do when they're performing innocence for an audience. When they called my name, I stood up. My voice didn't shake when I said, "Here." I don't know how. I walked to the stand and Karen looked at me, and the dabbing stopped and the grief went somewhere, and what replaced it, just for a second before she blinked it away, wasn't sadness at all. It was a warning. I sat down in that chair and looked at the judge, and I thought about everything that had happened in the 18 days between the first morning Ryan walked into my 7th grade classroom and this moment. 18 days. Less than 3 weeks. And everything I thought I knew about who was dangerous and who wasn't, who told the truth and who didn't, who deserved to be believed and who had spent years perfecting the art of being believed, all of it had been turned completely over. I want to tell you how it started, because it started, like most things that change your life, on an ordinary morning when you have no idea what's coming. The first day Ryan Davidson walked into Mrs. Calhoun's 7th grade English class at Roosevelt Middle School in Clarkton, Ohio, was a Tuesday in late October. I remember the month because the windows still had construction paper jack-o'-lanterns taped to them. The room was warm. I had gotten there early and taken my usual seat by the window, 3rd row, second from the left, and I was copying down the homework from the board when the door opened. I looked up the way you do, habit, and then I noticed something strange. The room went quiet in a way classrooms don't usually go quiet, not the quiet of a teacher entering, something tighter than that. Ryan came in and stood at the front while Mrs. Calhoun marked him in her grade book, and I watched the faces of the kids around me. Jaden, who sat next to me, leaned back slightly in his chair. Priya, in the row ahead, was suddenly very interested in the cover of her notebook. Even Mrs. Calhoun had a half second of something, a flinch, almost, quickly replaced by professional pleasantness. Ryan was about my height, maybe an inch taller. Brown hair, worn sneakers, the kind that had started out white and now had that specific gray beige of fabric that had been cleaned too many times. His backpack had a small tear on the bottom left corner, held together with a piece of electrical tape. He held himself carefully, not nervously, carefully, like someone who had learned to take up exactly as much space as necessary and no more. He sat in the empty seat across from me. I was the only one not looking away, so when he glanced around and his eyes landed on me, I gave him the nod, the one that says, "Hey, fine, neutral, no agenda." He stared at me for a second like he was checking for something, then he nodded back. At lunch, I took my tray and sat across from him. He had a sandwich in a Ziploc bag and an apple and a small bottle of orange juice. He looked at me like I had grown a second head. "You actually want to sit here?" he asked. "Sure," I said. "The other tables are loud." He thought about that. "Yeah," he said. "They are." That was it. We ate in comfortable quiet for 10 minutes and talked for the last 5. His name was Ryan. He was 12. He'd moved here from Dayton after his parents split up. He liked old video games, the kind you had to emulate, and true crime documentaries, which I also liked, and he thought the sandwich bread at this school was somehow worse than every other school he'd been to, which made me laugh because it was genuinely terrible bread. I went home that night actually excited to tell my mom I'd made a friend. I should have known. Kids don't get quiet like that for no reason. I told her his name at dinner, Ryan Davidson. I said I'd eaten lunch with him and he seemed like a good person. My mom set her fork down. I remember the sound of it against the ceramic plate, a small final click. Her face had changed by the time I looked up. "Stay away from that family," she said. "What? Why?" "His father." She shook her head. "What happened to his mother? It was all over Facebook when they moved to the district. He beat her, Marcus. He put her in the hospital. I was 12. My mother had never lied to me about anything important, so I believed her. The next morning she drove me to school herself, which she hadn't done since 3rd grade. She walked me to the office and asked to speak to someone. I stood in the hallway outside and couldn't hear exactly what was said, but I saw Mrs. Calhoun's face when she came out of the meeting. That same tight expression I'd seen on the room yesterday when Ryan walked in. By first period, my seat had been moved to the opposite end of the classroom. Mrs. Calhoun said it was for a new seating arrangement. Nobody was rearranged except me. I watched Ryan from across the room. He didn't react when he noticed the empty seat where I'd been. He'd already learned not to react. He ate alone at lunch. He sat alone at recess. He read a paperback during free periods while the rest of us clustered in groups. The other kids weren't cruel to him directly. They were simply arranged around him in a way that left him a kind of hole in every social situation, a negative space. I watched his father pick him up some afternoons from the curb on Elmhurst. Ryan's dad drove a 2009 gray Civic with a dent above the back left wheel well. He was a broad-shouldered man with a short beard, probably mid to to late 30s, wearing the kind of clothes you wore when you'd come straight from a physical job, worn Carhartt jacket, work boots. He always arrived on time. He always got out of the car when Ryan was coming across the parking lot, not because he had to, just to be there. He'd put a hand briefly on Ryan's shoulder when Ryan reached him, check in with him. I could see this even from a distance, and then they'd get in and go. One Tuesday in early November, I watched him reach into the back seat of the Civic before Ryan got there and pull out an extra bag. He walked to the curb and held it out to Marcus Dwyer, who was in 6th grade and who everyone knew forgot his lunch money at least twice a week. Marcus's face went wary and then uncertain, and then he took it. Ryan's dad just nodded and walked back to the car. Nothing about this matched the story my mother had told me. I kept that thought to myself for 2 weeks. I watched and said nothing, because I was 12 and I trusted adults to have the full picture. But things didn't stop not adding up. Ryan stayed after school on Thursdays to help in the resource room, something Mrs. Calloway, the special ed coordinator, mentioned once in passing. A 7th grader, voluntarily, helping kids with learning disabilities work through reading comprehension. Nobody asked him to. He just did it. And then the afternoon that changed everything came on a cold Thursday, November 14th. I was walking home on Crescent, the long way, because I'd missed the first bus and didn't want to wait for the second. It was about 4:20 in the afternoon, already getting dark the way Ohio does in November, and I was cutting through the alley behind the tire shop when 3 8th graders I only vaguely recognized came around the corner. What happened next took maybe 90 seconds. They shoved me down onto the asphalt. One of them kicked me in the ribs, not hard enough to crack anything, but hard enough that I couldn't get up right away. Another one went through my jacket pockets. I had $23 in my inside pocket, birthday money from my grandmother that I'd been saving for a used copy of a game I wanted. Gone. They told me not to say anything, and then they scattered, not ran. Scattered suddenly in 3 different directions like they'd been startled. I was still on the ground when I heard boots on the asphalt behind me. Ryan's dad crouched down. He had a paper bag from the hardware store in one hand. He set it down and looked me over the way someone does when they're trying to assess damage without touching. "You okay, kid?" he said. His voice was steady. Not soft exactly, just level. "Yeah," I said. "I wasn't really. Can you stand?" I got up. My ribs hurt. He picked up his hardware bag and we walked. He didn't pepper me with questions. He didn't put his hand on my shoulder. He walked at a pace that matched mine and asked once if I wanted him to call someone, and I said no, and that was it. He walked me to the corner of my street, confirmed I could make it from there, and went the other direction without another word. When I told my mother what had happened, she was concerned about the mugging for about 45 seconds. Then I told her who had walked me home. She lost it. He approached you. He was watching you. Do you understand what could have happened? She had her phone out before I finished speaking. She called the school that night. She posted about it on the Clarkton Parents Network Facebook group. By 9 o'clock, there were 47 comments, and 2 of them were from other mothers who said they'd seen Ryan's dad lingering near the school. By the next morning, Mrs. Calhoun had been notified. By 10 a.m., Ryan's dad had been formally banned from school property. Couldn't even pick his son up from the curb anymore. The Facebook post called him a predator who lurked near children. Ryan came to school the next day looking like someone had hollowed him out. He sat in Mrs. Calhoun's class with that careful stillness he had, and I watched him from across the room and tried to understand what it felt like to have your father be the subject of 47 Facebook comments before breakfast. I couldn't. I was 12, and I still thought the people with the most comments were usually the ones telling the truth. That illusion lasted 11 more days. It was a Tuesday. I found Ryan in the back corner of the school library during lunch, behind the reference section where nobody went anymore since everything moved online. His shoulders were shaking. He heard me coming and got his face under control fast, the practiced speed of someone who'd had to do it before. But his eyes were still red when he looked up. They spray painted it on his car, he said. He didn't say the word. He didn't have to. He told me his dad had lost his job at the heating and air company. His supervisor had seen the Facebook posts. No formal process, just a text telling him not to come in on Monday. The car was still drivable, but Ryan's dad hadn't repainted it because he didn't have the money and because he said he refused to let it be the thing he spent the last of their savings on. They were behind on November rent. The apartment they were in was $820 a month, a 2-bedroom on Garfield Street, and his dad had already called the landlord and asked for an extension. The landlord hadn't said yes yet. "They're lying about my dad," Ryan said. "All of them." He was looking at the carpet when he said it. Then he looked up at me. "Do you want to see?" He pulled out his phone. What I saw on that screen took me several minutes to fully understand. Police reports from 2018 and 2019 filed by Ryan's dad, not against him. Court documents from a hearing in 2020. Hospital records showing treatment for a laceration above his father's left eye, dated March 7th, 2019. The same month, I would later realize that my mother had seen the Facebook posts claiming he'd put Ryan's mom in the hospital. Photos of bruises on his father's arms, on his neck. A restraining order filed by Ryan's father in June 2020. And then a second document, a withdrawal of that same restraining order 2 months later, with a handwritten note in the margin that said only fear of escalation. Ryan scrolled to a report from Child Protective Services witnesses, dated August 2021. He had a burn mark on his back from a lighter. The CPS report described it and named the person who had inflicted it. Her name was Karen. She hit us, Ryan said. Both of us. For years. When Dad finally got me out, when he took me and left, she called everyone she knew and told them he was the one. Told them he'd hit her. Showed them the pictures she already had planned. He swallowed. He'd never touched her. Not once. But she'd been building the story for 2 years. Waiting. Waiting for what? For him to leave. He closed the phone. She told him once, when I was 9. I heard it from the hallway. She said if he ever left her, she would make sure nobody believed him. She would make sure he lost everything. He looked at me. He left anyway. Because of me. He said he wasn't going to let her keep doing what she was doing to me. I sat there for a moment and thought about Ryan's father crouching on the alley asphalt, setting his hardware bag down carefully so he could look me over. His voice, steady, not frightened, not performing, just there. I reached for my phone and started photographing the documents on Ryan's screen. He grabbed his phone back. Don't. Ryan, you don't understand how she works, he said. If she thinks someone's digging, she makes it worse. She always makes it worse. I already have enough to start, I said. He looked at me for a long time. You're going to get yourself in trouble. He was right. But I had $23 in birthday money gone and a bruised rib and a boy whose father had walked me home without asking for anything. And I was 12 years old and I didn't yet know how to make peace with doing nothing. I went home that afternoon and started pulling public records. This took me about 4 hours and the school library's research database login, which I'd saved from a class project. I found Karen Davidson, that was her legal name, Karen Ann Davidson, née Marsh, in the Clarkton Municipal Court records going back to 2017. Prior to her marriage, she had 2 restraining orders filed against her by ex-partners. One in 2014 from a man named Derek Solis. One in 2016 from a man named Paul Reamer. An arrest for assault and battery in September 2016, outside a bar on Route 9, charges later dropped. The pattern was old and it was consistent, and it had been waiting there in the public record for anyone who looked. I organized everything into a document. Dates, case numbers, document types, evidence descriptions. I cross-referenced the CPS report numbers Ryan had shown me against the county database and confirmed they were real filings, not something he'd made up. Then I printed it at the library printer for 35 cents a page. 7 pages, $2.45 total. Folded them and put them in the inside pocket of my jacket where the birthday money used to be. My mother walked into my room at 9:15 that night and saw my screen. I'd gotten careless. I still had the county records database open. She saw Ryan's last name. She saw my document. You photographed their fake evidence? She wasn't yelling. The not yelling was worse. Marcus, delete it. All of it. Mom, it's not now. She took my phone. She locked down the family computer with a parental control password I didn't have. She grounded me for 2 weeks and told me this was for my own safety and that Ryan's family had manufactured these documents to protect a violent man and that I was 12 years old and not equipped to understand what was happening. She wasn't lying. She believed every word she said. That's what made it hard. The next week was a specific kind of misery. Teachers at school had been notified about my fixation on the Davidson situation. I didn't know the word had been used until Mrs. Calhoun pulled me aside Wednesday morning and asked gently if everything was okay at home. The guidance counselor, Mr. Bright, started pulling me out of third period twice a week for what he called check-ins. He asked careful questions. He wrote things down. I understood eventually that someone had flagged me as a concern, and I was being monitored. Ryan and I communicated through a library book. We'd identified a specific copy of an encyclopedia volume on the bottom shelf of the reference section, volume 14, N through Q, that nobody ever touched. We left notes in an envelope taped to the inside back cover. It sounds dramatic now. At the time, it just felt like the only option. On Thursday the 29th, I found his note. It said, "She knows you're digging." On Friday, I found the second note. It wasn't from Ryan. It was on a different paper, different handwriting, printed in block letters. "Stop digging or your friend pays the price," and a single initial, K. I stood in the reference section holding that note for a long time. Then I folded it and put it in my pocket with the records. That same afternoon, on my second phone, a prepaid I'd bought for $15 at a gas station 3 weeks earlier, after reading about them in a true crime book, which tells you something about my research habits, I got a text from an unknown number. It said, "Your friend looks tired. Sleeping in cars is dangerous. Anything could happen." Karen Davidson had just threatened a 12-year-old child in writing. I kept both notes. I photographed the text. I sat on it for 4 days because Ryan had begged me not to act impulsively. But by Tuesday, December 3rd, I had exhausted every idea I had about going through official channels. My mother was not going to listen. The school was not going to listen. The police, I had actually called the non-emergency line from my prepaid phone one afternoon, and a bored-sounding officer had told me that kids shouldn't be involved in custody disputes and to have a parent call if I had concerns. So I did the only thing left. I uploaded everything to YouTube. It took me 2 hours to compile the video. I used screen recordings of the public document, photographs of Ryan's dad's records from the photos I'd taken on my phone before Ryan grabbed it back, photos of the threatening notes, a screenshot of the threatening text. I narrated over it in my most neutral voice, just facts, dates, dates, names, case numbers. I was careful not to editorialize. I had read enough real journalism by that point to know that editorializing was how you gave people a reason to dismiss you. I posted the video on a channel with no name, no profile picture, no other content. Then I dropped the link anonymously in the Clarkton Parents Network Facebook group at 11:17 p.m. on a Tuesday night and went to bed. I woke up at 6:04 a.m. to 53 notifications on my prepaid phone. By the time I was dressed, the video had 340 views. By the time I got to school, it had broken 1,000. The comments were split almost exactly in half. One half was calling me a liar, a disturbed child, a plant by the Davidson family to discredit the community's protective instincts. The other half was quieter and more careful. Why would a 12-year-old fabricate this? What does a kid gain from this? Have you looked at the actual court record dates? My mother burst into my room at 3:30 that afternoon. She had found the video. I'm not sure how, either through the Facebook group or through someone who recognized the specific documents. Her face was a color I hadn't seen on her before. "What have you done?" she said. It wasn't a question. Before I could answer, Karen made her move. She posted a response to the Facebook group with security camera footage, edited clips, me outside the library, me on the sidewalk near Garfield Street once where I'd walked past her building by accident, me at the copy machine. She called me a stalker. She called me a disturbed child engaged in a harassment campaign against a vulnerable family. She called for the community to report my video to YouTube and to contact my school. She posted my full name. Within 48 hours, the video had been reported and removed. My father received a call at his accounting firm from someone he didn't know, who told him his son was being investigated for online harassment of a domestic violence survivor. The school suspended me pending a psychological evaluation. Mr. Bright scheduled mandatory twice-weekly sessions. My parents sat me down at the kitchen table, and my dad, who had been quiet through all of this, looked at me with an expression that was more exhausted than angry and said, "Marcus, why?" I didn't know how to explain it in a way they'd accept, so I didn't try. The video was gone. My computer was gone. My phone, even the prepaid, had been found and confiscated. I had no platform and no evidence, and a psychological evaluation scheduled for December 12th. And then a woman named Sarah commented on the cached version of my video that someone had re-uploaded before YouTube removed the original. Her comment was 8 sentences long. Her name was Sarah Whitmore. She wrote, "Karen Davidson was my college roommate at Ohio State from 2002 to 2004. Everything this child is describing is consistent with what I witnessed during that time and after." She put her then-boyfriend, a man named Derek Solis, in the hospital in the spring of 2003 and spent the following 3 months building a narrative in which he was the aggressor. I have photographs from that period and documentation she doesn't know I kept. I am happy to testify to any of this in any forum that will have me. I found out about this comment at school the next day when Jaden, who had been following the whole thing without my knowledge because it was genuinely the most interesting thing happening in Clarkton that winter, showed it to me on his phone during passing period. By that evening, Sarah Whitmore had posted her own video. She was a woman in her late 30s, sitting in what looked like a home office, speaking directly to camera with the flat effect of someone who had rehearsed composure. She had a folder in front of her. She opened it. She showed photographs from 2003. Karen with bruised knuckles laughing at the camera, a bar booth, 4 other women around her. On the back of one photo, in Karen's own handwriting, teaching him a lesson. She showed a police report listing Karen as the primary aggressor in the incident with Derek Solis. Then she showed something else. It was old video footage, the kind from a camcorder, with the timestamp burned into the bottom right corner in orange digital numbers. A college dorm room, a birthday party, noise and laughter, and then Karen's voice, very clear, close to the camera. "He was going to leave me, so I made sure nobody would believe him when he tried." Laughter from the people around her, the kind of laughter that thought it was in on a joke. Sarah's face, for a frame, at the edge of the shot, not laughing, looking at the camera like she already knew she was going to regret not saying something. Sarah had kept that tape for 20 years. The video got 11,000 views before Karen's lawyers sent a takedown notice. It had been screenshotted, clipped, shared across 4 Facebook groups, 2 Reddit threads, and a local news tip line by then. You can't unring that bell. Karen had one move left and she played it fast. She posted to Facebook on a Saturday morning at 7:15 a.m. that Ryan had run away from home. She had a photo, Ryan's empty bed. She had a statement about how worried she was, how her son was troubled, how the harassment campaign she'd been subjected to had broken their family apart. Local news picked it up by noon. By 2 p.m. she was on camera outside her house. Different house than the Garfield Street apartment, which I'd never known she'd had access to. In a soft gray sweater, no blazer this time, no composed professional veneer. This time she was the mother, trembling lip, clasped hands. I watched the broadcast on the TV in our living room, and I knew immediately. Ryan would not run. Ryan had nowhere to go. He had told me, in one of the library notes, that he had no close relatives in Ohio. His dad's sister was in Pittsburgh. His grandmother on his mom's side had passed in 2020. There was nowhere for a 12-year-old to run to in Clarkton in December, which meant Karen had done something with him. I was not supposed to have access to any devices. devices. My prepaid was gone, but our neighbor, Mrs. Pellegrino, who was 71 and had lived next to us for 9 years, had lent me her tablet once to look up a recipe. She didn't always lock it. I went over that afternoon under the pretense of shoveling her walk, which I did properly because I liked her, and while she made me hot chocolate, I borrowed her tablet for 6 minutes. I went live on YouTube from the cached account Sarah had shared access to after learning who I was. I had 2 minutes before I thought anyone might notice what I was doing. Ryan Davidson did not run away, I said. I kept my voice level. 12 years old. Level. His mother is hiding him. She has done this before, in a different form. Ryan is not somewhere safe. He is somewhere she put him. He does not have family to run to. If you have seen Karen Davidson's car, gray 2017 Honda Odyssey, Ohio plate FTN 4428, in an unusual location in the past 48 hours, please call the Clarkton non-emergency line. I gave the plate number because Ryan had told it to me weeks earlier, the same way he'd given me small pieces of information over those weeks, not because he thought I'd need them, just because telling me things was the only thing he had. I ended the stream. 12 minutes later, it had 400 views. Tips were already coming in. 2 callers reported the Odyssey at a self-storage facility on Route 22, the Easy Store location near the county line. One caller said they'd heard something from Unit 34 that sounded like it might be a voice. Police were dispatched at 5:47 p.m. They found Ryan at 6:03 p.m. in Unit 34 at the Easy Store on Route 22. He had a sleeping bag. He had a half-liter bottle of water. He had no light. He had been there since Friday evening, approximately 22 hours. Karen was arrested in the parking lot of the storage facility. She had come back. I don't know what she had come back to do. I don't think she'd thought that far ahead. As they put the handcuffs on her, she looked across the parking lot at the police car where someone had told her I was responsible for the tips. She looked directly at the car window, and she said it loud enough that the officer next to her heard it clearly. "This is your fault. You did this." The officer's report noted the statement. The custody hearing was scheduled for Monday, December 9th at 2 p.m. in the Clarkton County Family Court on West Vine Street. Karen had hired 3 lawyers over the weekend. She appeared on a morning talk show at 8 a.m. I was told this by Jaden, who watched it before school, in the soft gray sweater again, tearful, holding screenshots of my YouTube video, and calling it a coordinated harassment campaign driven by a troubled minor and a malicious ex-partner. The host nodded along and thanked her for her bravery. Ryan's father had a court-appointed attorney. His name was Mr. Gallardo. He was 62, wore a suit that had been let out at the seams, and had a briefcase with a broken latch he held closed with his thumb during arguments. He had 20 years of family court experience, and he had seen Karen's type before, which counted for more than the suit. I was scheduled to testify because I had filed an affidavit through my father, who had finally, fully, looked at the documents I'd compiled, and sat at the kitchen table for 40 minutes without speaking before he said anything, detailing the threatening notes, the threatening text, and everything I had witnessed and documented over the previous 18 days. My mother drove me to the courthouse. She didn't say much. She had done her own research over the weekend, after Sarah Whitmore's video, after the storage unit, and what she'd found had changed the shape of things for her. She hadn't apologized yet. I think she didn't have the words yet. Some reckonings take time to become language. In the parking lot, before we went in, she reached over and put her hand on the back of my head for a moment. That was all. The courtroom smelled like old carpet, and heat turned up too high. My legs didn't reach the floor in the wooden chair. Karen Davidson came through the far door in her gray blazer and sat with her 3 lawyers and performed, with extraordinary precision, the role of a wounded mother fighting for her child. When they called my name, I walked to the stand. Karen looked at me. The dabbing stopped. The grief went somewhere. What replaced it just for a second was naked, furious. A warning she couldn't stop herself from sending, even in that room, even with the judge watching even now. I looked at her for a moment, then I turned to face the judge. "Tell us, in your own words," Mr. Gallardo said, "what you observed on November 29th in the school library." So I did. I said it all clearly and in order. I described the note. I described the threatening text on the prepaid phone, which had been retrieved from evidence and was now Exhibit 14. I described the library messages, the documents Ryan had shown me, the pattern I had found in the public record, what I had seen of Ryan's father in the weeks before any of this started. I described a man who packed extra sandwiches for kids who forgot their lunch money, a man who walked a mugged 12-year-old home without asking for anything. Karen's lead attorney, a woman named Heller, cross-examined me for 22 minutes. She tried several angles. She suggested I was coached. She suggested the documents were fabricated. She suggested my video constituted harassment. She asked me at one point whether I understood the difference between what I had seen and what I believed. I said, yes, that's why I only testified to what I saw. The judge looked at me then, not with warmth exactly, with the thing that comes before judgment, the period of actually seeing someone. Ryan's father sat at the respondent's table the whole time with his hands folded. He looked at me once, briefly, when I was walking back from the stand. The same expression as the alley. Level. There. Present. Not performing anything. The hearing took 2 days. I wasn't there for the second day. The judge issued a temporary custody order on Wednesday afternoon, granting full physical custody to Ryan's father father pending a full evaluation. Karen's visitation was suspended pending a separate hearing regarding the storage unit incident. The threatening note, the one with the initial K, and the text message were referred to the county prosecutor. Karen's 3 lawyers issued a statement calling the decision politically motivated and promising an appeal. Karen herself posted on Facebook that evening a photo of Ryan's empty bedroom, captioned simply, "My son." I thought about what it meant to look at an empty room and see ammunition. Ryan went home with his dad that Wednesday evening. They had stayed in a motel, the Comfort Inn on Route 9, $52 a night, since the custody hearing began because the Garfield Street apartment lease had lapsed and Ryan's dad was looking for something new. Ryan texted me from his dad's phone because his own had been taken by Karen and not returned. He said, "You didn't have to." I said, "I know." He said, "I didn't think anyone would actually do it." I sat with that for a while. I understood what he was saying. He'd shown me those documents in the library not because he believed anything would change. He'd shown me because he was 12 and he was desperate, and there was simply nothing left to do except tell someone the truth, even if it led nowhere. He had made peace, in the way children sometimes do when adults have failed them for long enough, with the likelihood that nothing would happen. He had been waiting for someone to see and do nothing. That was his baseline expectation. I thought about the note in the library book. Volume 14, N through Q. The envelope taped to the inside back cover. The way he'd written, "They're lying about my dad." And underneath it, in smaller letters, as if he'd almost decided not to include it, "I don't know if it matters anymore." That line stayed with me longer than anything else. Still does. What happened after was slow and not dramatic in the way stories are usually dramatic. Karen's appeal was filed in January. It worked its way through family court for 7 months. The county prosecutor did pursue the threatening communication charge, a misdemeanor in Ohio, but it produced a record. Karen pled no contest in March and received 2 years probation and a mandatory counseling order. The social media posts calling Ryan's dad a predator didn't disappear from the internet. Those things never fully do. But they stopped being the first thing you found when you searched his name. Eventually, something else was. Ryan's dad got a new job in February, a smaller HVAC company in Dayton, which meant they moved back, which meant Ryan changed schools again. We stayed in touch on the prepaid for a while, and then on a group chat, and then in the diffuse, intermittent way of middle school friendships that survive on the margin of each other's attention. He visited once the following summer, and we rode bikes on the trail behind the reservoir and ate gas station snacks and didn't talk much about any of it. His dad dropped him off and picked him up. When he came to get Ryan at the end of the day, he nodded at me from the car window. That same nod from the courtroom, from the alley, level, present. I nodded back. My mother and I talked about it finally in February, 4 months after the hearing. We were in the car. I don't remember where we were going. She said at a red light without looking at me. I should have looked harder before I said what I said. I said, "You believed what you heard. That's not the same as being right." She meant it. It didn't fix everything, but she meant it. I think about that sometimes. How easy it is to take a story that fits the shape of a story you already believe and hold it as fact and build on top of it and never look at the foundation. My mother is not a cruel person. She's a person who trusted the wrong source and didn't examine it and moved too fast. So did everyone else in that parking lot. So did the guidance counselor and Mrs. Calhoun and the 47 comment leavers and the morning talk show host. They all believed they were protecting someone. They were protecting an idea, the idea of a certain kind of danger, so thoroughly that they couldn't see the actual danger until a 12-year-old made a video from a borrowed tablet. I think about Ryan's line a lot, the one at the bottom of the library note, in the small letters, "I don't know if it matters anymore." That's what it looks like when someone has been failed so many times that hope becomes a thing they're embarrassed to admit to. That's what happens when the story about you gets louder than you are. I was 12. I had $23 stolen and a bruised rib and a boy who needed someone to look at the actual evidence. I didn't do anything heroic. I did what any curious, angry, stubborn person does when the story doesn't add up. I kept pulling the thread. The rest was just what was already there, waiting to be found. The title of my mother's Facebook post, the one she shared when the Clarkton Parents Network started in on Ryan's family, was, "Warning, predator in our neighborhood, stay away." She deleted it in December. Some warnings protect. Some warnings are just fear with nowhere better to go. Learning the difference is the work of a lifetime, and it starts, usually, with sitting down next to someone everyone else has decided to avoid. Ryan Davidson was funny and kind and normal, and his father was a man who set down a hardware bag to help a stranger, and the only monster in that story spent 20 years making sure everyone was looking in the wrong direction. I knew that the first time I looked his father in the eyes on that alley asphalt, I just had to make everyone else see it too.